Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Islamic Defense Podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us, Brother Hatim. So Brother Hatim, tell us about yourself. Like, who are you? What do you do?
Hey, assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me. This is Hatem. So who am I? I grew up in the United States my whole life in New York. And ever since I was a kid, I've always been really interested in computers. So that's actually what I do for work. I'm in IT.
It's actually interesting to hear you say that because I've never actually been to New York. My only experience of New York actually comes from playing Grand Theft Auto. So it might not be very authentic.
Yeah, I actually do remember that game. I think I played it in high school. And from what I remember, it was actually pretty accurate, especially the area depicting Queens, which is actually where I'm from. And no, we don't have any Romans in New York.
Well, that's good to know that there's no Roman in New York, but you guys do have a YouTuber in your country called Genetically Modified Skeptic, whose real name is Drew McCoy, and he lives in Dallas, Texas. Now, he's a well-known and popular atheist YouTuber who has made several videos against organized religion, essential oil, and other things. But recently, I noticed that he has been making a lot of videos against Islam. Recently, he made a video about the World Hijab Day. So let's take a look and see what he has to say about hijab.
World Hijab Day. It's an event founded by Muslim activist Nazma Khan, which takes place each February 1st. It encourages women of all backgrounds to try wearing the hijab in order to experience what it's like, normalize its use, and, quote, stand for her right to cover. Those who observe it often promote the idea that the hijab is an empowering choice which does not deserve its existing stigma. Carrying this message is the popular hashtag free in hijab. Along with this event, this understanding of the hijab is growing increasingly popular in the Western world. Many non-Muslim Westerners now support the use of the hijab rather unequivocally and view any opposition to it as bigotry. Many others stand in opposition to this understanding of the hijab and to World Hijab Day, however. Countless activists all over the world are now celebrating No Hijab Day on February 1st. I'm a part of the community that embraces No Hijab Day and stands against the idea that hijab is a symbol of empowerment. I think I speak for this community when I say that I believe that all women should have the right to choose what they want to wear, including head coverings, without coercion.
Now, take a note of what he just said. Drew accepts the premise that all women should have the right to choose what to wear, including the head covering. I think this statement will come in handy later, but let's continue.
However, I think the hijab represents the antithesis of that right.
Now, take note again. This is his second premise. He believes that the hijab represents the antithesis or is against the right to choose what to wear.
And supporting it achieves the same. So, here I'd like to make the case that supporting the hijab and efforts like World Hijab Day actually hinders progress in the struggle for women's rights around the world.
And finally, his third premise is that supporting the hijab is also against the right to choose what to wear. Now, let's put this into perspective and see what the argument is actually about. Now, I don't think I even need to point out the obvious flaw in his argument, but as you can see, it's a complete non sequitur. He is committing the fallacy of inconsistency. His premise 1 and premise 3 completely contradict one another. Because in premise 1, he is saying that he supports the woman's right to wear whatever they want, so he basically agrees with the World Hijab Day activists because that's their main argument. That's basically what they're saying. And that they're saying that everyone should support women's right to cover. However, then all of a sudden, in premise 3, he shifts his goalpost and he then says that supporting the hijab day is also against women's right to wear whatever they want. But the problem is that he himself said that he supports the right to wear the hijab. So which one is it? Does he support women's right to wear the hijab, or does he think supporting the right to wear the hijab is against women's right? Because it can't be both. Now I can already hear what he will probably say. He will probably say that, yeah, but I meant I support the right, but I don't support the hijab itself. Now, first of all, that's a strawman argument because the hijab day activists are basically saying what he already agrees with, that women should have the right to wear what they want. But you know what? It's fine. let's say for the sake of argument that I accept that he supports Muslim women's right to cover, but he doesn't support hijab and what it represents. But that's even more problematic because that statement is a complete oxymoron. He believes in two things that completely contradict one another. Because the thing is that you can't say that you support a woman's right to cover and then say, but I don't support the cover itself and what it represents. I mean, if you support their right to cover, then you clearly support the cover itself. Otherwise, it's complete hypocrisy. Because you believe the hijab represent the opposite of women's right, but you're fine when your country allows women to do something that you believe is against women's rights. I mean, that's complete hypocrisy. That makes you a complete hypocrite. So you're still being inconsistent and you're still committing the fallacy of inconsistency. So anyway, Brother Hatim, what do you think? Am I missing something here? Because it seems like his argument is completely nonsensical and contradictory. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually really like that syllogism. I also wanted to make a case in the opposite direction in order to show how inconsistent he's being. So he's essentially saying, I'm pro women wearing whatever they want to wear, except the hijab is contrary to that. The problem with this is I can make the argument in the opposite direction, just say the hijab is actually less damaging for women than, say, pornography because it's less exploitative of women. And then he'll probably return with, well, please define exploitative. To which I would say exploitative is making use of a situation in order to gain an advantage or benefit. And is that what's happening to women in pornography? Sure. Now, he could argue, but that's their choice. If they want to do that, that's fine. And then I could say the same thing. I could say, well, it's their choice if they want to wear the hijab. If they want to do that, it's fine. Then he's going to say, yeah, but I see it as bad because it's damaging to women. I'm like, I see pornography as bad because it's damaging to women. So you're saying that we should oppose it? I mean, if you're opposing the hijab and you don't oppose pornography, I really don't know how you can claim to be for women's empowerment. And that's for damn sure.
Yeah, I agree 100%. By the way, I kind of skipped his second premise because he later tries to justify why he believes that hijab is the antithesis of women's right to wear whatever they want by making a bunch of arguments, and he brings his ex-Muslim friends to help him out. So let's take a look at what they're saying and see if these arguments are valid or not.
Hijab is not often a choice.
Hijab was a huge part of my identity as a Muslim. I wore it from the age of 5 years old because I went to a Muslim school where it was part of the uniform.
Now, this is her first premise, that she went to a Muslim school where she was forced to wear the hijab because it was part of her uniform, part of the uniform. I think this will come in handy later, but let's continue.
And we were taught that a girl's beauty had to be hidden from boys. There was never any question or debate on that because it was obligatory and ordered by God.
Now, this is her second premise, that she was taught as a girl that girls' beauty had to be hidden from boys and that there was no debate as it was ordered by God.
And if you didn't wear hijab, you would be tortured and burnt in hellfire. I remember being told as a little girl that there were various punishments that could be done to you in hellfire, including you hang from the strands of hair that you've shown to men that aren't related to you. So you'd be essentially punished for every single strand of hair that was seen. So there really isn't much choice when it comes with a threat of violent punishment.
Now, this is her third premise. She was taught that if she didn't wear the hijab, she would be punished by the strands of her hair.
Girls that didn't wear hijab, or even girls that did wear hijab but made an effort to beautify themselves, are seen as wanting that attention from men in Muslim communities. This mentality has led to a very strong slut-shaming culture. So this social stigma and religious pressure has led to many women, millions of women across the world, being forced and abused to wear the hijab.
Now, this is our fourth premise. Girls who want to beautify themselves are seen as wanting the attention, resulting in a slut-shaming culture. As a result, millions of women are forced to wear the hijab. Not sure where she got that number from, but let's continue.
Then on top of that, there are Muslim countries out there such as Iran and Saudi Arabia where it is mandatory by law to wear the hijab. So if they weren't to wear hijab, they could be punished by the government. In fact, Saudi Arabia includes the burka, the full black garment, the abaya. That is also mandatory. So there are so many women who just don't have this basic human right of being able to choose how they dress.
Now, this is our fifth premise. In many Muslim countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia, it is mandatory by law for Muslim women to wear the hijab. So if she doesn't wear the hijab, she could be punished by the government.
Freedom of choice is worth celebrating, but when there are millions of girls and women that are suffering because of their lack of choice and their lack of freedom when it comes to hijab, it becomes much more prevalent to spread awareness of their oppression and make change happen.
Now, this is our conclusion. Since hijab is often not a choice, therefore it's more important to free women from oppression. Therefore, the hijab day should be opposed. Now, let's see her argument as a whole. Now, as you can clearly see, her whole argument is a complete strawman argument. And it has literally nothing to do with the World Hijab Day. The main argument is that of the World Hijab Day is that everyone should support a woman's right to cover, because it's something both the Muslims and the non-Muslims agree on. None of her premises have anything to do with this. She changed their argument and made something that they didn't say and attacked that. This is nothing but a two-quo fallacy, and in many secular countries, wearing the veil or the burqa is completely banned. For example, it's banned in countries like France, Belgium, Netherlands, Italy, Spain, Switzerland, and Denmark. My aunt, for example, always wore the burqa and no one forced her to wear it. Now, if she went to Denmark and wore it she could be arrested for that. Or they could lock her up, like an animal for violating the law. Now, the argument everyone should support women's right to cover applies here. So many hijab activists are often talking about this, the fact that these countries has banned the veil or the burqa. Now, instead of addressing this issue, she is pointing the finger at Muslims and saying, aha, but look at these bad Muslims, look at what they're doing, in an attempt to try to shift the conversation away from this actual issue that is raised by the activist. And the thing is that also she is attacking something that has literally nothing to do with the hijab day. Now, this is enough to reject this bogus point that as to why hijab day should be opposed, because this is a complete strawman argument and has nothing to do with it. However, she made some even more ridiculous claims in her premises, and that I want to address. For example, in premise 1, she says that she was forced to wear the hijab in school because it was part of her school uniform. I mean, yeah, no shit. Schools have uniforms. I mean, most private schools have a dress code. They have to wear it. If it's not the veil, it's the suit or the skirt or something else. I mean, does she also have a problem with school skirts or other uniforms? For example, in Japan, oftentimes in private schools, girls have to wear a skirt. And even in America or in Europe. Now, in premise 2, she's making a special pleading fallacy, where she's making a special case for Islam, because most religion, if not all, say the exact same thing. For example, in the Bible, 1 Corinthians 11, chapter 11, verse number 5, it says that every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. So how come she doesn't have a problem with this? I mean, why doesn't she criticize the Christian or the Christianity, or the nuns for that matter? This shows her and Drew's confirmation bias and bigotry towards Islam. The premise 3 is false because it is based on a fabricated hadith. According to a fatwa of the Permanent Committee of Scholarly Research of IFTA, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the fatwa number is 19,493. It says that this hadith about women's punishment with the strands of hair is completely fabricated. Her premise 4 is absolutely nonsensical, because here she is committing the anecdotal fallacy. This claim is solely based on her experience, and it can be used to make a generalization of the entire Muslim community. Otherwise, that would be a hasty generalization fallacy. Also, according to Pew Research, the top 8 country with the highest number of Muslim population, only one of them, namely Iran, has a law that enforces women to wear the hijab. And Iran is a Shia majority country. So, majority of Sunni Muslim countries with the highest Muslim population like Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Egypt does not have a law that enforces women to wear the hijab, which is almost like 61% of the entire Muslim population. So, I have have a question. If the Muslim community do have a slut-shaming culture, then how come 61% of them don't force women to wear the hijab? I mean, are you saying that they're all sluts? Like, what's going on here? You know, I mean, many Indonesian women do not wear the hijab. Many Pakistani women also do not wear the hijab. In Bangladesh, one of the most culturally worn dress is the sari. I mean, yeah, sure, maybe some people think like this, but to say the entire Muslim community thinks like this is just completely stupid, and it's a hasty generalization fallacy. Now, her fifth premise at least has some gas in it. It is true that Iran and Saudi Arabia has a law that enforces women to wear the hijab. However, both of these countries have a totalitarian government. Forcing liberal or secular principle on such government or countries makes no sense, because these are totalitarian government. And also, it's a faulty comparison fallacy. You're comparing two things that has nothing to do with each other. And also, another thing is that this doesn't violate liberalism per se, because according to social contract theory, which is a liberal theory, this can be justified. The social contract theory refers to an invisible contract between the people and the state. People have consented either explicitly or to surrender some of their freedoms and submit to the authority of the government in exchange for the protection of their remaining rights or maintenance of the social order. So based on this, I'll make an argument. Premise 1. We know both the government of Saudi Arabia and Iran provide safety and security to their citizens. In exchange, the citizens surrender some of their freedom to the government or the state. Premise 2. We know government of Iran and Saudi Arabia demands that women have to give up their right to wear what they want in exchange for the safety and security provided by the government. Conclusion. Therefore, women of both Saudi Arabia and Iran as citizens have to give up their right to wear what they want in exchange for the safety and security and other rights provided by their countries. So as you can see, making the hijab or niqab mandatory by law is perfectly justifiable even in liberalism, especially if you follow the Thomas Hobbes definition of social contract. Now, ex-Muslims will probably say, yeah, but I don't have to agree with Hobbes. Fine, no problem, but then the government of Saudi Arabia and Iran also don't have to agree with you either. So really, it goes both ways. So as you can see, her argument is invalid. It is a non sequitur because the conclusion does not follow the premises, as almost all of our premises are either false or fallacious. Anyway, Brother Hatem, what do you think? What do you think of her arguments?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I was actually going to say a lot of the points that you mentioned. I think the problem with the arguments that the skeptic provided and his guest was that all these arguments are rested upon the correlation means causation fallacy. So the entire argument of all three guests, as I remember, was pretty much, I have been oppressed for not wearing the hijab, or there are women who are oppressed for not wearing the hijab. So therefore, the hijab is inherently oppressive, and genetically modified skeptic, you know that isn't necessarily true. I don't even have to convince you. You probably already know this. I assume you studied philosophy, or maybe you haven't studied it academically, and maybe you just have a lot of experience in argumentation. But you and I both know that this is not a good argument, and that's that.
The basis of the hijab.
Hi guys, my name is Zara K. Here's a few reasons why I think embracing the hijab can be harmful to subjugated women.
Nice. She is already starting off with bigotry towards Muslim women. She says embracing the hijab is harmful to subjugated women, which means if you are a Muslim woman, you are subjugated. Now, I really hope that I am misunderstanding her or something, because if not, then this is nothing but bigotry.
While hijab is known to be a form of covering for modesty, a lot of people fail to recognize the invention of it and the introduction of hijab. Sure, head veilings existed pre-Islamic era.
Now, this is our first premise, that head covering existed before Islam.
But the hijab was introduced by Muhammad in the 7th century to segregate Muslim women from free women, which means that the free women who did not wear the hijab were taken as slaves.
This is our second premise. Hijab was introduced by Prophet Muhammad in 7th century to segregate Muslim women from free women, and others were taken as slaves.
Sure, the hijab exists for both men and women, however practiced in very different forms. For men, the hijab is lowering their gaze. However, for women, it's actually covering themselves up.
This is our third premise. Hijab exists for both man and woman. However, for men, it's lowering the gaze, and for women, it's covering themselves up.
Movements that promote hijab are only detrimental to the society for those who don't have the choice of wearing the hijab. More often than ever, it is the oppressed that are always silenced. Movements like Free in Hijab suppresses the rights of those who disagree with the hijab. and conform to the patriarchal standards of society.
This is our fourth premise. Movements that support hijab are harmful to those who don't have the choice to wear the hijab, and the oppressed are always silenced. Hijab Day suppresses women who disagrees and conforms the standards of patriarchal society.
Embracing the hijab feeds into oppression because what is the alternative? Ostracism, physical and emotional abuse, and even hellfire, let alone countries where they stone women to death for ever trying to take off their hijab or even jail them.
This is our fifth premise, that embracing hijab is oppressive because otherwise women would be ostracized or physically or emotionally abused, or they will get hellfire or even jail.
Let's fight against this oppression. Let's not support movements like Free in Hijab. We should be free from hijab.
Therefore, Hijab Day should not be supported and women should be free from it. Now let's see the whole argument as a whole. Now, as you can see, she's committing the fallacy of inconsistency, because the premises, especially the premise 1 and 2, completely contradict one another. At first, she admits that head covering existed before Islam, and then she says hijab was introduced by Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Now, I mean, if the hijab already existed, then how can the Prophet introduce it? I mean, it already exists. So, also in the Quran, chapter number 24, verse number 31, the original Arabic, it says that kamar, or head covering. It doesn't say hijab necessarily. It says to bring down what they were already wearing of the kamar, or the head covering, to cover themselves. So, as you can see, this concept of head covering already existed before Islam came. All Islam did, or in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only ordered them to already cover themselves with what they were already wearing. So this is nothing new. This thing already existed. This head covering already existed. And it could be very much, and I have a picture actually that I'll show you on the screen right now, where it shows that it is indeed true that women in pre-Islamic age in Arabia did actually wear head covering, or even what you would call today a niqab, the full veil. So this is nothing new. Here she starts a conspiracy theory. So apparently the hijab was introduced as a big ploy to screw the woman of Arabia over. Forget the fact that not a single woman in Arabia complained about this. According to one hadith, it says that it was narrated by Safiya bint Shayba that Aisha radiallahu anhu said that when the verses were revealed, the verses were revealed that, and to draw their veils over their bodies or face, the women, they took their izars, which is a kind of garment, and they tore it from the edges and they literally covered their faces with it. This hadith can be found in Sahih Bukhari 4481. Now, as you can see, the women, when they heard that these verses were revealed, they literally took some of their garments, ripped it off, and covered their faces with it. No one forced them to do that. They did it by themselves. They were happy to do it. They couldn't wait to do it, because they were glad that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has finally given them a command to do something. It was an honor for them. So the idea that women of Arabia were somehow tricked into wearing the veil is completely false. Also, she said that others were taken as slaves. This is nothing but a fairy tale, and it's a complete lie. Yes, the hijab was revealed so the Muslim women can identify themselves and distinguish themselves from the women of Jahiliyyah or the non-believers. But that doesn't mean that others were taken as slaves. That's just a complete fabrication and a lie. I want to ask Drew as to why his friends are lying. In premise 3, it's another lie. In Islam, Muslim men also have a dress code. For example, in Islam, we men cannot wear silk. We cannot let our garments that we wear hang down beneath our ankles. As a matter of fact, the Prophet ﷺ warned us that men, if their garments are goes beneath their ankles will be in the hellfire. It was narrated by Abu Huraira in a hadith where he said that the Prophet said, whatever of the lower garment is beneath the ankle is in the fire. It is in Sahih Bukhari 5450. So as you can see, as men, we cannot dress however we want. We have to dress the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to dress. So it's not just women. So as you can see, both women and men in Islam have to be dressed in a certain way.
Which makes me think, if men are meant to lower their gaze, why are women still required to cover themselves up? Why the double standards? Why are women the ones being objectified in this case?
Also, she says that why is it that men have to lower their gaze and women have to cover up? she thinks that this is a double standard. However, that's not true because there are many things in Islam that women can do but a man can't. For example, wearing silk. Man can't wear silk, but woman can. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith that these two things, gold and silk, are forbidden for men of my ummah. And however, it is permissible for the woman. And this is narrated by Ibn Majah. The hadith number is 3640. This hadith is classified as Sahih by Sheikh Albani and in Sahih Ibn Majah. Also, men can wear dress that covers their ankle, but women can. So here she is committing the special pleading fallacy and making a special case for women. Again, in premise 4 and 5, she is committing the questionable cause fallacy. Just because hijab is associated with some women being forced to wear it, it doesn't mean hijab or hijab day itself is bad or that it should be opposed. Also, if that's the argument, why doesn't she have a problem with her country's military? The women in the military are also forced to wear the uniform. I mean, what should we do now? Should we start a no military uniform day? What about the Sikh men in India? They're also forced to wear a turban on their head. So what? Like, should we now start a no turban day? Because Sikh men are forced to wear it? What about the nuns or the Orthodox Jews or Christians or 100 other religions that commands their believers to dress a certain way? Now, you see, the thing is that none of this head covering for man or woman are oppressive. None of this head covering mean that they're oppressed. It just means that this is their culture, and this culture is different than yours. It's their culture, it's their religion, it's their law, it's their identity. That's what you're trying to take away from them. That's what people don't understand. Their identity, that's what you're really criticizing. You, Zara K, you probably think that the idea of wearing a dress for God is inferior to the idea that you can wear whatever you want. However, that is the literal definition of what bigotry is. And that's exactly what you're preaching. Bigotry. Also, why should the non-Muslims support ex-Muslims in Iran over Muslim women in Europe who also don't have the right to wear what they want in countries like France and Denmark? Is it because the ex-Muslims have rejected their inferior Islamic culture and have embraced the superior Western culture, quote-unquote? I think that's a valid question to ask.
Supporting the hijab also supports the agendas of those who promote modesty culture, which places value on women based on their bodies and sexual purity as if they're a commodity.
Now, Genetically Modified Skeptic here thinks that the modesty culture values women based on body and sexual purity. Again, that's not true. The idea of modesty is that women are not defined by how they look, which is why they cover themselves, because it's more important for them to be defined by who they are inside as a person rather than what they look like outside. This is the opposition of being valued by body and sexual purity. The thing is that no one is saying that women only have value if they cover themselves or if they're sexually pure. Because in Islam, there's a hadith that says, Abu Huraira, who reported that Prophet Muhammad said, there was once a prostitute who had once been forgiven. She was one day passing by a dog and she saw that the dog was panting near a well. The thirst nearly killed the dog. So she took off her sock, tied it to her veil, and drew up some water. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave her for that. And she was a prostitute. And this hadith can be found in Sahih Bukhari 3143. So for all I know, many non-hijabis could go to heaven and many hijabis could go to hell based on their action. How they'll be treated in the afterlife is based on their actions. And that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala judges. So as you can see, Drew, that in Islam, it's not about how a woman dress. It's about who they are inside as a human being, because that's what matters. Yes, Muslims have a dress code, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't judge them by their dress. He judges them by their action. So it's not about how they dress. If you think that it's about how they dress, then I'm sorry, my friend, but you don't understand what Islam is about. Now, I'm going to ignore the last ex-Muslim, Yasmin Mahmood, because she just rehashes the same tired arguments that we already refuted. She uses strawman arguments and a lot of history generalization fallacy, where she takes some random events and generalizes the entire Muslim community. She also uses the appeal to emotion fallacy, where she uses emotion instead of reason, which is fallacious. She says that it was bad for her and other Muslim women, and you know what, I feel sympathy for you. But this does not justify opposing the hijab day. In countries like France, women still cannot wear a niqab. They cannot cover themselves. They cannot practice their religion. Even when they do, oftentimes they're bullied, tortured, or abused, or even killed. Just a few days ago, there was an incident in a mosque in New Zealand, Christchurch, where one guy went to the mosque and massacred like 39 people in cold blood. And the thing is that I watched the video, and at one point the shooter shoots the hijabi sister in the back twice, and she was crying in pain. And then he goes closer and he shoots her in the head. And the thing is that you honestly think that if she didn't wear the hijab, the shooter would have chosen to shoot her in the road like that? Of course not. In UK, for example, one 13-year-old hijabi sister was bullied, and she says that this is very common. And this type of bullying happen all the time. And the thing is that this should stop. My sisters in my country or abroad, my Muslim sisters, should not be tortured, bullied, or killed just because they wear the hijab. They have the right to wear it. In places like France and Sweden, where they claim to believe in women's right and all this rubbish, and yet they do not give the Muslim woman the right to wear what they want. And the thing is that non-Muslim can actually do something about this systematic bigotry. They can speak up. However, they cannot do anything against Saudi Arabia or Iran because these are totalitarian governments. They have no power over them. The thing is that if the ex-Muslims or people who don't want to wear the hijab really feel uncomfortable, then they can leave the country. However, that being said, the West have no right to impose their laws on foreign governments. The thing is that they tried this with Afghanistan and Iraq, and millions of innocent people were killed as a result of it. Innocent civilians. And the countries are a complete mess now. Syria has become a rubble, and no one wants that. And if that's what you really want, then you can take your warmongering, self-righteous, post-colonial, and bigoted Western ideals, and you can throw it in the garbage bin, because we don't want it. With that, I'm done. This is a whole rant. Brother Hatem, what do you think of this argument, their arguments they made so far, and let us know your last thoughts.
I don't think there's much else to be said, bro, but at the very least, I wanted to leave them with a message, and I hope that the genetically modified skeptic already knows this. The secular liberalism that you guys believe in, genetically modified skeptic and Mimsy and everybody else on the video, that entire belief system is no more true than any other belief system. And I challenge you to prove your belief system as objectively true. If you can't, then everything that you're saying is just a matter of your opinion. So who's to say that our beliefs aren't true and your beliefs are? Who's to say the alternative? And you really can't. Now, the problem I have with this is, in knowing that your beliefs aren't absolutely true, you're still trying to impose your beliefs on others. And this is honestly no different than Christians protesting outside of an abortion clinic, yelling at that the poor lady's trying to get an abortion. And you probably challenge that and say, listen, it's the woman's choice if she wants to have an abortion or not. You would say that she doesn't believe in what you Christians believe in, and you don't believe in what she believes in. And that's fine. You guys need to be more tolerant of other beliefs. And he'd probably go on the offensive and say, hey, listen, you guys can't even prove the Bible to be true. You guys can't even prove God exists. You can't even prove your religion to be true. And so why are you here bothering this poor lady, evangelizing your beliefs? And we extend this exact same question to you, genetically modified skeptic. Why are you evangelizing your beliefs if you can't even prove them to be true? I really think you should just try more tolerance. I think that's the way forward for you. I mean, the alternative is us just talking about epistemology and why we believe what we believe. And then we could really get down to the nitty-gritty and start examining this. Because talking about the hijab and the differences in our way of life is kind of pointless, because we know that there must be differences because our fundamentals are different. So let's talk about the fundamentals instead, huh?
And with that, we'll end our podcast. Thank you, Brother Hatem, for joining us. And inshallah we'll do more work together in the future. And and before I go, I just want to share with you guys a 3-minute clip of Nazma Khan explaining why she started the World Hijab Day. And the thing is that I'm not going to tell you what to think. That's not my job. I'm just going to show you the clip, and you guys can decide yourself whether you want to support the Hijab Day or not. But all I can say is that if our sisters, as Muslims, if our sisters are really going through these kind of things, then I think it becomes obvious what we should do as Muslims. And I hope that you guys understand where she's coming from, and I hope that non-Muslims can understand where we are coming from, and that's all I want. So yeah, I'll leave you guys with her video. she can explain herself the best, and she's the best person to explain it, the person who actually started the movement. So yeah, inshallah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I came to America at the age of 11 from Bangladesh with my family of 6 for a bright future. By the time I reached America, my parents only had $10 in their pockets. Our humble beginnings did not prevent my parents from sending me to school, but they had no idea what was waiting for me at school, neither did I. I hardly spoke a word of English and was the only one wearing the headscarf, also known as the hijab, in the entire school. I chose to cover up, to obey my creator and make a statement about my identity as a Muslim woman, which I held so close to my heart. But I had no idea that a piece of fabric on my head would cause me so much pain for the next several years. I was discriminated both verbally and physically. I was called names such as Batman and Ninja. At one point, students literally kicked me and spit at me, both inside and outside the school. I was so scared I used to enter the school from the boys' entrance instead of the girls'. I believe I was the only girl to do so. The lowest point of my discrimination at middle school in the Bronx was not what I went through by my classmate, but rather when my English teacher started to make fun of the way I dressed. As a teacher, he was supposed to protect me and help me boost my confidence. Yet he did the opposite by crushing my self-esteem to the ground. I faced similar situations at high school, but with much more intensity. I still remember the day when a bunch of girls, they were waiting for me outside my classroom just to pull off my hijab. And of course, how can I forget the moment of being surrounded by at least 10 to 15 boys who spit and mocked my hijab. I feel so helpless and terrified. I constantly face the following question: don't you ever dress normal? Constant discrimination continued throughout my high school years. I could have dropped out of my high school, but that was never an option for me. In fact, I graduated on top of my class. Sorry. I was more terrified when I entered university during the time of 9/11. Being a Muslim in New York City after 9/11 was risky to begin with. On top of that, being a hijabi was a direct sign saying she's a Muslim. I constantly lived in fear as I was called names such as Osama bin Laden and terrorist. And of course, I could never avoid those stares as if I was from a different planet. I even got chased a few times on the street. It was a total nightmare. Fast forwarding a few years, on October 1st, 2010, I launched an online hijab store called stunninghijab.com. One of the aims of my business was to serve others. I wanted to have a support system where Muslim women could share their hijab experience. Shortly afterwards, I started to receive emails from women across the globe. I specifically remember this 14-year-old girl named Aliyah from UK. She wrote me an email explaining how her classmate chewed gum and spit at her hijab, and it became a laughing matter just because of her hijab. I also received countless messages from women who got fired from their job and was rejected at their job interviews just because of their hijab. After reading all these messages, I was able to relate to them, sympathize with them, and knew exactly what they're going through. During the summer of 2011, after receiving many messages from women across the globe with similar situations, I kept on thinking, how can I help these women? How can I help myself? That's when the idea of World Hijab Day came to my mind. I thought if I could invite women in all faiths, Muslim and non-Muslim, to walk in my shoes just for one day, perhaps things would change.